Catherine, the Princess of Wales, sat quietly in her private study at Kensington Palace, watching her youngest son Louis through the window. The 7-year-old was completely absorbed in his tablet, his small fingers swiping across the screen with practiced ease. She noticed how his shoulders were hunched forward and how he seemed oblivious to the beautiful spring morning outside. This scene had become increasingly common in their household, despite all their efforts to maintain balance. Even with the best intentions and resources, the Wales family was struggling with the same challenge that millions of families around the world faced every day: managing screen time in an age where digital devices had become essential parts of daily life. Catherine remembered her own childhood vividly. She and her siblings Pippa and James would spend entire afternoons building forts in the garden, reading books under the old oak tree, or helping their mother with cooking projects in the kitchen. Their entertainment came from imagination, outdoor adventures, and face-to-face conversations with family and friends. The closest thing to a screen was the family television, which was carefully regulated and watched together during specific hours. But times had changed dramatically. As a mother of 3 children in the modern world, Catherine understood that technology wasn't inherently bad. Prince George, now 11, needed his computer for school assignments. Princess Charlotte, 9, enjoyed educational apps that helped her with mathematics and languages. Even little Louis was learning to read through interactive story apps that brought characters to life in ways that traditional books couldn't match. The challenge wasn't eliminating screens entirely, but finding the right balance. Catherine had noticed subtle changes in her children's behavior that concerned her. They seemed less patient during conversations, more easily frustrated when activities didn't provide immediate gratification, and increasingly reluctant to engage in activities that didn't involve some form of digital stimulation. Prince William shared her concerns. During their private conversations in the evenings, they often discussed how different their children's world was from their own upbringing. William remembered climbing trees with Harry, playing endless games of football in the palace grounds, and the excitement of receiving a new book or toy that would capture his imagination for weeks. Now, even the most expensive toys seemed to hold their children's attention for mere minutes before they asked to return to their devices. The turning point came during a family vacation to Scotland. Catherine had planned a technology-free weekend at Balmoral, hoping to reconnect as a family without digital distractions. The first day was challenging. George complained constantly about being bored. Charlotte kept asking when she could check her messages from school friends, and Louis had several meltdowns when he realized his favorite games weren't available. But something magical happened on the second day. Without screens to rely on, the children began to rediscover simple pleasures. They helped their father collect firewood, spent hours building an elaborate sandcastle near the loch, and gathered around Catherine in the evening as she read them stories by candlelight. She watched as their attention spans gradually lengthened, their creativity flourished, and, most importantly, they began to truly connect with each other again. Catherine realized that many families didn't have the luxury of a technology-free retreat, but the principles they discovered could be applied anywhere. The key wasn't to demonize technology, but to help children develop a healthy relationship with it from an early age. She began researching child development studies, consulting with education experts, and, most importantly, listening to other parents who were facing similar struggles. What she discovered was both alarming and hopeful. Studies showed that excessive screen time was indeed affecting children's ability to concentrate, their sleep patterns, and their social development. But research also revealed that when used thoughtfully and in moderation, technology could enhance learning and creativity rather than diminish it. Catherine began to see her role extending beyond just being a mother to her own 3 children. As someone with a significant public platform, she had the opportunity to share insights that could help families everywhere navigate this modern challenge. She wasn't interested in preaching or presenting herself as having all the answers, but rather in opening up an honest conversation about something that affected virtually every family in the developed world. The princess started by making small changes within her own household. She established device-free zones and times created alternative activities that were genuinely appealing to her children and, most importantly, examined her own relationship with technology. She realized that children learn more from what they observe than from what they're told, and she needed to model the behavior she hoped to see in them. This journey of discovery and gradual change would eventually lead Catherine to develop practical advice that she felt compelled to share with families everywhere, knowing that the lessons learned within the walls of Kensington Palace could be adapted and applied in homes across the globe. Catherine's research into screen time management led her to some surprising discoveries. She spent hours reading studies from child psychologists, education specialists, and technology researchers. What struck her most was how recent this challenge really was. Many of the parents seeking advice were pioneering uncharted territory, trying to raise children in a digital world without having clear guidance from previous generations. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a child development expert whom Catherine consulted, explained that the human brain wasn't designed to process the constant stimulation that modern devices provide. Children's developing minds were particularly vulnerable to becoming dependent on the immediate rewards and constant entertainment that screens could provide. However, Dr. Mitchell also emphasized that technology itself wasn't the enemy, but rather the way it was being used. Catherine decided to conduct her own informal research by speaking with parents from various backgrounds. She visited local schools, community centers, and family support groups, always maintaining her genuine interest in learning rather than lecturing. What she heard were stories that resonated deeply with her own experiences. Maria, a working mother of 2 young children, shared how mealtimes had become battlegrounds. Her 6-year-old son would throw tantrums if he couldn't watch videos while eating, and her 4-year-old daughter had stopped engaging in conversation altogether during family meals. Maria felt guilty about using screens as digital babysitters when she needed to handle work calls from home, but she also felt overwhelmed by the constant demands of parenting in a world where both parents often work full-time. James, a single father of 3, explained how evenings had become easier once he allowed unlimited screen time after homework was completed. His children were quiet and occupied, giving him time to handle household tasks and decompress from his demanding job. But he worried that his kids were becoming isolated from each other and from him. Family game nights had become impossible because the children claimed board games were boring compared to their video games. These conversations helped Catherine understand that screen time management wasn't just about children's development, but about family dynamics, parental stress, and the practical realities of modern life. She began to develop a more nuanced understanding of why so many families struggled with this issue, even when they understood the potential negative effects of excessive screen use. At Kensington Palace, Catherine started implementing new strategies with her own children. Instead of imposing strict rules without explanation, she began having age-appropriate conversations with George, Charlotte, and Louis about why balance was important. She explained how their brains worked, using simple analogies that helped them understand why they sometimes felt restless or unhappy after long periods of screen use. With George, who was old enough to understand more complex concepts, she compared excessive screen time to eating only candy for every meal. Just as their bodies needed different types of food to grow strong and healthy, their minds needed different types of activities to develop properly. She helped him notice how he felt after spending 2 hours playing video games versus how he felt after building something with his hands or playing football with his father. Charlotte, being naturally curious and competitive, responded well to challenges and goals. Catherine introduced a point system where different activities earned different values. Reading earned points, outdoor play earned points, helping with family tasks earned points, and, yes, educational screen time earned points too. But entertainment screen time was neutral, neither earning nor losing points. This helped Charlotte begin to see screen time as just one option among many, rather than the most desirable activity. Little Louis required a different approach entirely. At his age, distraction and redirection worked better than explanation. Catherine made sure that when his screen time ended, there was always something immediately appealing waiting for him. She learned to anticipate his needs and have alternative activities ready before meltdowns could begin. The most important change Catherine made was in her own behavior. She realized that she had fallen into the habit of checking her phone frequently throughout the day, often while spending time with her children. Even though her phone use was mostly work-related, her children couldn't distinguish between important communications and casual scrolling. They simply saw their mother repeatedly choosing to look at a screen instead of giving them her full attention. Catherine established phone-free times for herself, starting with meals and bedtime routines. She discovered that when she was fully present, her children required less entertainment and were more content with simple activities. They began to engage in longer conversations, share more about their thoughts and feelings, and seemed generally more settled. Prince William noticed these changes and became more involved in creating family activities that naturally competed with screen time. They started weekly nature walks where each family member had to find something interesting to share with the others. They instituted cooking projects where the children took turns choosing recipes and helping with preparation. Most successfully, they created invention time, where the family worked together to build things, solve problems, or create art projects. These experiments within the Wales household became the foundation for the advice Catherine would eventually share with other families. She was learning that successful screen time management required understanding each child's individual temperament, addressing the underlying needs that screens were meeting, and, most importantly, creating family cultures where non-screen activities were genuinely enjoyable rather than feeling like punishment or deprivation. 6 months into their screen time journey, the Wales family faced their biggest test during the Christmas holidays. With 2 weeks away from school routines, the children naturally expected more freedom with their devices. Catherine and William decided this would be the perfect opportunity to implement a comprehensive family media plan that they had been developing. Rather than imposing new rules suddenly, Catherine called a family meeting. She explained that they were going to create their holiday schedule together, and everyone's input would be valued. This approach surprised the children, who had expected lectures about reducing screen time. George, as the eldest, was given the responsibility of helping create a visual schedule for each day. They used a large whiteboard in the family room, dividing each day into sections. Green sections were for outdoor activities, blue for learning or reading, yellow for family time, purple for creative projects, and red for personal screen time. The visual representation helped all the children understand how a balanced day could look. What Catherine discovered during this process was revolutionary for their family dynamics. When children had input into creating the structure, they were much more cooperative about following it. George suggested that they earn extra screen time by completing outdoor activities first. Charlotte proposed that they have technology-free meals, but could watch a family movie together once a week. Even Lewis contributed by choosing which toys and books should be easily accessible when screen time ended. The holiday schedule revealed something important about their children's relationship with technology. When screens were limited but not eliminated entirely, and when there were genuinely appealing alternatives available, the children didn't feel deprived. Instead, they began to use their screen time more intentionally. George stopped mindlessly scrolling through videos and chose specific games or educational content that he really enjoyed. Charlotte began requesting art apps that let her create digital paintings rather than just consuming entertainment. Catherine also noticed that her children's creativity flourished when they were bored and couldn't immediately turn to screens for entertainment. Lewis started elaborate pretend games with his stuffed animals. Charlotte wrote stories and created comic books about their family adventures. George developed an interest in photography, using an old camera to document their daily activities. The success of their holiday experiment gave Catherine confidence to share her experiences more publicly. She began accepting invitations to speak at parenting conferences and family support events. Her approach was always humble and practical rather than prescriptive. She shared what had worked for their family, while acknowledging that every family situation was different. At a community center in London, Catherine spoke with a group of mothers who were struggling with screen time battles. She shared the story of their visual scheduling system and how involving children in creating structure had transformed their household. Many mothers expressed frustration that their children seemed addicted to screens and would have meltdowns when devices were taken away. Catherine explained her observation that children often use screens to meet legitimate needs: boredom relief, social connection, learning, or emotional regulation. The key was helping children find alternative ways to meet those same needs. She shared practical examples from their own family's journey. When George felt lonely and wanted to connect with friends, instead of immediately reaching for his gaming device, he learned to call friends for actual conversations or arrange in-person activities. When Charlotte felt overwhelmed by schoolwork, instead of escaping into entertainment videos, she learned to ask for help or take breaks through physical movement. When Lewis felt restless and energetic, instead of becoming hypnotized by cartoons, he learned to recognize that his body needed active play. One mother asked Catherine how she handled the guilt that many parents felt about screen time. This was a question that resonated deeply with Catherine's own experience. She admitted that she had struggled with feeling like she was either being too strict or too permissive, and that social media often made her question her choices when she saw other families' seemingly perfect approaches to technology. Catherine's response was honest and reassuring. She explained that perfect balance was impossible and that families needed to find approaches that worked for their specific circumstances. Some days, when children were sick or parents were overwhelmed, more screen time was necessary and acceptable. The goal wasn't perfection, but rather developing family habits that supported children's overall development and family connection. She also addressed the reality that many parents were dealing with their own complicated relationships with technology. Catherine admitted that she had needed to examine her own phone habits and make changes to model the behavior she wanted to see in her children. This honesty resonated with parents who felt hypocritical asking their children to limit screen time while they themselves struggled to put their phones down. During these conversations, Catherine began developing what would become her core message to families. Screen time management was really about intentional living and family values. Technology could be a wonderful tool for learning, creativity, and connection when used thoughtfully. The problem arose when screens became the default activity or the primary way children learned to cope with emotions like boredom, loneliness, or frustration. Parents and our audiences began sharing their own successful strategies. One family had designated Sunday as Analog Day, where everyone, including parents, avoided unnecessary technology use. Another family had created a charging station in the kitchen where all devices lived during family time. A single mother had found that her children were more cooperative about screen limits when she scheduled special one-on-one time with each child doing activities they chose. These exchanges convinced Catherine that families were hungry for practical advice and reassurance that they weren't alone in struggling with these modern challenges. She began to envision a more formal way to share the insights and strategies that families were discovering together. By the spring following their successful holiday experiment, Catherine felt ready to formalize her insights into practical guidance that could help families everywhere. Working with child development experts and drawing from conversations with hundreds of parents, she began developing what would become a comprehensive but accessible guide to family screen time management. The timing felt particularly important as she observed the lasting effects of the pandemic on children's relationship with technology. Many families had necessarily relied heavily on screens during lockdowns for education, entertainment, and social connection. Now, as life returned to normal, parents were struggling to reestablish healthy boundaries that had been temporarily suspended during crisis times. Catherine partnered with several family organizations to conduct informal surveys of parents' biggest challenges. The responses revealed common themes that went beyond simple screen time limits. Parents were concerned about their children's shortened attention spans, their apparent inability to tolerate boredom, their decreased interest in outdoor play, and their difficulty engaging in face-to-face conversations. But parents also reported positive aspects of their children's technology use. Educational apps had helped some children with learning differences access curriculum in new ways. Creative software had allowed artistic children to explore digital art, music production, and storytelling. Video calls had enabled children to maintain important relationships with grandparents and friends who lived far away. This nuanced picture helped Catherine refine her message. Her goal wasn't to villainize technology, but to help families develop intentional approaches that maximize benefits while minimizing potential harm. She began calling this mindful media use rather than screen time management, emphasizing the importance of being thoughtful about how and why technology was used rather than simply focusing on duration. Catherine decided to test her developing advice through a pilot program with several diverse families. She worked with families from different economic backgrounds, family structures, and technological comfort levels. Each family committed to implementing specific strategies for 1 month while documenting their experiences. The Chun family, with 2 working parents and 3 children ages 5 to 12, struggled with the chaos of mornings and evenings when everyone was trying to get ready while children begged for screen time. Catherine suggested creating transition rituals that helped children move between activities without relying on screens as rewards or distractions. They implemented a morning routine where each child had a checklist of tasks to complete before earning any recreational screen time. But more importantly, they created positive alternatives for the time children previously spent on devices. The kitchen became a gathering place where children helped pack lunches while listening to music and chatting with parents. Evening wind-down time included reading, gentle stretching, or quiet conversation instead of stimulating screen entertainment. After 3 weeks, Mrs. Chen reported that mornings had become significantly smoother, and children were going to bed more easily. The children had initially resisted the changes, but they began to enjoy the increased attention from their parents and the sense of accomplishment from completing their routines independently. The Williams household faced different challenges. As a single mother working from home, Sarah Williams had relied heavily on educational screen time to keep her 4-year-old son occupied during work calls. She worried about his development, but felt trapped by her circumstances. Catherine worked with Sarah to identify specific times when screens were most necessary versus times when alternatives might be possible. They created quiet boxes filled with activities that could entertain her son independently. Puzzles, coloring books, building blocks, and simple craft supplies. Sarah also established signals that helped her son understand when she absolutely couldn't be interrupted versus times when he could ask for help or attention. The breakthrough came when Sarah realized that her son's behavior after screen time was often more challenging than his behavior when he was engaged in hands-on activities. While screens kept him quiet during her work calls, they often left him restless and demanding afterward. The alternative activities required more initial setup time, but resulted in a calmer, more content child overall. Through these pilot families, Catherine learned about the importance of addressing underlying family stresses that made screen time feel like the only viable option. Many parents weren't choosing excessive screen time because they thought it was best for their children, but because they felt overwhelmed by competing demands and lacked practical alternatives. The Martinez family revealed another crucial insight. Their teenage daughter had been struggling with social anxiety that seemed connected to social media use, but she was resistant to limits because she feared being excluded from peer communications. Working with Catherine, they developed an approach that addressed the social and emotional needs underlying her technology use. Instead of restricting access, they helped their daughter develop media literacy skills and emotional awareness about how different types of screen time affected her mood and self-esteem. They created daily check-ins where she could talk about online interactions that bothered her, and they established phone-free study time that helped her concentration and sleep quality. This family's experience highlighted the importance of adapting strategies to children's developmental stages and individual needs. What worked for a preschooler was completely different from what worked for a teenager, and effective approaches needed to evolve as children grew. Throughout this pilot program, Catherine documented not just what worked, but what didn't work and why. She learned that rigid rules often backfired, creating power struggles and resentment. She discovered that parents' own technology habits were more influential than any rules they established for children. Most importantly, she realized that successful screen time management was really about creating family cultures that valued diverse activities, face-to-face connection, and thoughtful decision-making about technology use. These insights from real families dealing with everyday challenges formed the foundation of the practical advice Catherine was preparing to share with a broader audience. A year after beginning her journey into understanding family screen time challenges, Catherine felt ready to share her insights in a comprehensive way that could reach families across the country and beyond. She chose to launch her guidance through a series of accessible formats: a detailed but practical guide, video discussions with real families, and partnerships with schools and community organizations. The core of Catherine's message centered on 5 key principles that had emerged from her research and real-world testing. These weren't rigid rules, but flexible guidelines that families could adapt to their unique circumstances and values. The first principle was model mindful use. Catherine emphasized that children learn more from observing their parents' technology habits than from any rules or lectures. She encouraged parents to examine their own relationships with devices and make changes that aligned with the values they wanted to instill in their children. This meant putting phones away during family meals, avoiding the urge to document every moment on social media, and demonstrating that technology was a tool to be used intentionally rather than a constant companion. The second principle was create compelling alternatives. Catherine had learned that simply removing screens without providing genuinely appealing alternatives led to resistance and resentment. She encouraged families to invest time and energy in discovering activities that their children found truly engaging. This might mean learning new skills alongside their children, exploring local nature areas, or dedicating space in homes for creative projects. The key was ensuring that non-screen activities felt like opportunities rather than punishments. Her third principle was involve children in creating structure. The most successful families in her pilot program had been those where children participated in developing their own family media plans. Catherine provided templates and suggestions for family meetings where everyone could contribute ideas about when, where, and how technology would be used. When children felt ownership over the decisions, they were much more likely to follow through with agreements. The fourth principle focused on address underlying needs. Catherine stressed that children often use screens to meet legitimate needs: social connection, learning, entertainment, or emotional regulation. Rather than simply restricting access, parents needed to help children identify what needs their screen time was meeting and find alternative ways to meet those same needs. A child who used games to connect with friends might need help arranging in-person social activities. A child who watched videos when feeling anxious might need to learn other coping strategies. The final principle was embrace imperfection and flexibility. Catherine acknowledged that perfect balance was impossible and that family circumstances change constantly. She encouraged parents to focus on overall patterns rather than daily perfection, to adjust strategies as children grew and changed, and to give themselves permission to use more screen time during challenging periods without guilt or self-criticism. To demonstrate these principles in action, Catherine shared detailed case studies from families who had participated in her research, including her own family's ongoing journey. She was careful to present multiple approaches rather than a single correct method, recognizing that cultural backgrounds, financial circumstances, work schedules, and children's individual temperaments all influenced what strategies would be most successful. One of the most powerful aspects of Catherine's guidance was her emphasis on the positive outcomes that families had experienced. Rather than focusing primarily on the problems caused by excessive screen time, she highlighted the benefits that families reported when they implemented more intentional approaches to technology use. Children showed increased creativity and problem-solving skills when they regularly experienced boredom and had to generate their own entertainment. Family relationships strengthened when regular device-free time created opportunities for deeper conversations and shared activities. Children's sleep quality improved when screens were avoided in bedrooms and before bedtime. Academic performance often increased when children developed better focus and attention spans through varied activities. Catherine also addressed common obstacles that prevented families from making desired changes. Many parents felt overwhelmed by the prospect of managing their children's screen time on top of all their other responsibilities. She provided simple starting points, choosing just one meal per day to be screen-free, designating bedrooms as technology-free zones, or implementing a family charging station during homework time. For working parents who felt guilty about using screen time to manage childcare demands, Catherine offered reassurance along with practical strategies. She emphasized that using technology strategically during busy periods wasn't harmful when balanced with intentional family time and varied activities throughout the week. The response to Catherine's guidance exceeded all expectations. Parents shared stories of transformed family dynamics, children who had rediscovered interests in reading and outdoor play, and reduced daily conflicts around technology use. Teachers reported improvements in children's attention spans and social interactions at school. Perhaps most importantly, families began sharing their own innovations and adaptations of Catherine's principles. A community of parents emerged, supporting each other through the challenges of raising children in the digital age. Local libraries began hosting family technology workshops. Schools incorporated media literacy and digital citizenship into their curriculum more comprehensively. Catherine's final message to families was one of empowerment and hope. She reminded parents that they had more influence over their children's relationship with technology than they might realize, and that small, consistent changes could create significant positive impacts over time. Technology would continue to evolve, but the fundamental principles of intentional use, family connection, and balanced living would remain relevant. The journey that had begun with Catherine noticing her son absorbed in his tablet had evolved into a movement, helping families around the world navigate one of the defining challenges of modern parenting. Through sharing her own family struggles and successes, she had created a resource that validated parents' concerns while providing practical hope for positive change. Most importantly, Catherine had demonstrated that addressing screen time wasn't really about technology at all, but about creating family cultures that prioritized human connection, creativity, and intentional living in an increasingly digital world. Her advice continued to reach new families, evolving and improving through the collective wisdom of parents who were committed to raising thoughtful, balanced children in the 21st century.